The Dakota Proclamation by Meredith Quinn, Musa. Everybody helps the lie. We have a change of scenery and another segment of the Crusaders for the Indians, close-cropped haircut men who have spent their entire lifetime on the Old West history of the cowboy and Indian. A special meeting is called because of this book. I can just see these great old historians with 10-gallon hats, cowboy boots, and Indian bolo ties, sitting around with their faces turning red, because most of them consider themselves the one and only authority on this subject. The glorious Old West, the aboriginal on his horse, feathers flying, painted from head to toe, riding over the hill, would be the ultimate image of manhood. If you take their hero off his horse, you've got a fight on your hands. Yet not one of these persons will step up and state that history, as told in the educational systems of this country, is a total lie. They too know that according to their research, which is taken from very limited documentation that gives only one side, that shows that the Indian must be destroyed. Their spare time is spent seeing movies and TV showing Indians without reason as savages attacking white people, while the superior paleface, hiding behind some kind of jungle bush in the middle of the desert, shoots 200 Indians from a gun that can only hold 6 bullets. It was the other way around. Even Jack Forbes, the so-called authority of the Indian in the Southwest, takes his documentation from the people who wrote after being sent here to destroy and hide the system that they used. But let me impose some questions for some so-called great minds of the world. 1. Tell me why the lack of reviewing of documentation of the spread of disease over the Indian on the reservation or the area where he is found. 2. Why the lack of reviewing documentation on the industrial cities of the Indian when the white man arrived? Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Twin Cities, Denver, New Orleans, and etc. were all cities built on top of old Indian capitals. Even in Mexico, their capital city was built on top of an old Indian capital, which will give you some idea what they think of Indians down there. The Potawatomi Indians, a very interesting group in which much is known that is not written or recorded, but taken from their history which was not recorded to be reviewed by the world, tell the story of how their journey was more gruesome than the Trail of Tears under President Andrew Jackson. And page 47 is missing, so we continue. There were peaceful industries, races, and nations throughout the territory of the United States which had no jails, prisons, insane asylums, army, or police. The first clue exposed in 2 documents, Manifest Destiny and the Mohawk Conference, state that all original culture, language, and races must be destroyed. Quote, the method of destruction of the Aboriginal peoples of the world becomes interesting because of the many unanswered situations which are not permitted to the logics of the intellect. End quote. Let me impose still another question. Why is there no reviewing of documentation of the highly industrial cities in existence when the white man arrived? Why is there no history taught in the academic systems of this country on the city's urban areas and the method of entering these areas? When I review some of the recorded, complete fiscal writings of the Department of the Interior of the years from the 1870s through the 1900s, I find that the inventories of livestock on the reservations across this country were in sums and amounts enough to make it impossible for the Indians ever to go hungry and not be wealthy ranchers. Yet no one has recorded or written about these vast amounts of livestock that the Indians received from treaty stipulations with the white men whom he had defeated. Why does no one present these facts to the public and educational system of this country? What became of this livestock that were in astronomical figures that the Indian possessed? We can only look at it and say, quote, "The alteration of the white man's history was not done from a minute and obscure valuation, but from a major concept, to direct opinions, political views, and historical facts to a given point built without any foundations of the truth." End quote. How else could great cities belonging to the Indians be totally destroyed, along with the human lives, if diseases had not been purposely introduced to their communities? Let me approach the Indian white man problem from an idea. No diplomat, president, or committee that rules nations can evaluate our problems till these questions have answers. They are questions that deal with birth, life, and death of peoples of a sovereign nation that won recognition according to international law by defeating the white race. In the study of Quetzalcoatl, Undagawana, Black Elk, Wavoka, Handsome Lake, and in the reading of the book He Walked the Americas, they all have concepts of the Indian in the Christ belief or in the Son of God. These religions all state that when Christ left the Indians on this part of the world, he was still all right. It's when he got on the other side of the world that he got into trouble. But then let's look at that part of the world. In the European Bible, under Genesis 4:2, it reads, "Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of this fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and his offering, but unto Cain and his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell." Remember that in verse 8, Cain slew Abel over this concept. Cain brought the fruit of the ground, or shall we dress it up and put it like it was, and say he brought the fruit of his industrial state? Now, what was the punishment of the crime which he committed against his brother Abel? Was it hanging, execution, or prison? Let's take a look. Verse 11 reads, "And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And Cain said unto the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. And the Lord said unto him, Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden." That's right. Cain, the industrial, the white man, is cursed forever. He used to be a fugitive and vagabond forever, and no one is to kill him for killing his brother. But the ones that are not his brother, well, as long as he kills his own brother, he is to be left alone. But when he kills other than his brothers, he is to be cursed. Have you ever gone to other countries? The white man is truly a fugitive and a vagabond. No one likes him. Just for a little religious lesson, read in the book of Matthew, the 5th chapter, verses 1 through the 12th. Let me see how many people outside the Indian can live by these set of rules. When I take 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and can comprehend what it states, and then can understand the white man's world and the concept presented to the congregations by the preachers of this faith, remembering that as the white man moved westward across the territory, even with his Bible in his hand, he believed the Indian to be subnormal and animal. He killed, cooked, and ate the noble red man at his campfires when there was nothing else to eat. When I look at this study, I reason and compare facts. What did Cain do to Abel? And ask if God was trying to stop this sort of thing, or was his God the God of genocide? Now for the last lesson, because it truly is the last. Whenever religion or politics is brought up, the white man will fight or argue. And when you study them both, I can see why there is disagreement. For instance, Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 reads, "And God said, Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the cattle, fowl of the air, and over all the earth, and over everything that creepeth upon the earth." Now, you tell me who was present, the Indian or the white man? I think the white man is trying to pass his curse onto the cultural peoples of the earth, because there's no way he can get out of it. He is out from the face of the earth. He must hide his face from God. He is a vagabond and a fugitive, and he is cursed by God. You say this Indian is twisting facts? All right, have it your way. From what I know of the truths of the white man, his truths are lies, so my lies have to be the truth. Many white men know this, but live the lie and compound the lie. The white man that did the movie Billy Jack knows this, but he too knows the Indian business. Like his kind before him, will make him wealthy. Nevertheless, you say to yourselves, maybe he's sincere. Maybe after 130 years, this white man really means to help. But there were 3 years between the making of this picture till it was shown. The Chahamaha grapevine says nothing. The picture is a success. Yet why does the Indian say nothing? You start to ask around. Still nothing. Should I, with all this information, which no university, legal Indian aid, OEO programs, or activists themselves consider it too hot to handle, dare ask to see if he would show it? Still no answer. Then a still tiny voice starts to speak from the activist corner. All we know is that this white man screen-tested Indian girls, but in the picture, a white woman played the part. It continues, he seems to be trying to direct our energies another way uselessly. There's much to be done to go that route. Now you have something to play with. True, the half-breed in the movie is in love with a white woman, not an Indian girl, but the white woman. The Indian had been omitted again by a sophisticated presentation, which looked like it was helping the Indian. The half-breed was caught between two worlds, trying to make it to the white right. The government was making a deal with a half-breed, not an Indian, but a half-breed. My Indian brothers and sisters know something was wrong, but couldn't put their finger on it. Me, schooled and in knowledge of all the ways that make up the psychological patterns of the white man, failed to see it immediately. Now this man bears watching on everything he does. I can just see a head shrinker coming to the aid of this man in a dark suit, dark horn-rimmed glasses, and with one eye looking at you, while the other was trying to see what the other eye was focusing into. He mentions the monkey, a distant relative of the white man, swinging from tree branch to tree branch, banana in his hand. He goes into great detail on how a cow eats green grass with a pink mouth, gives white milk, and shits brown. Yes, the white man has produced some strange things. A lot of half-breeds, such as the Mexican, Guatemalan, Peruvian, Brazilian, Puerto Rican, and Cuban. But he's never been able to produce a nation of Indians. A guide to Indian legal terminology as defined by the courts of the land. 1. Abrogate. To abolish, in reference to the Indian, this word is used against his treaties. 2. Alienation. The privilege to trade, sell, or give away property of the Indian can only be done by the United States government and not the individual Indian himself. Alienation imposed by the United States. 3. Assimilated. An individual Indian who has surrendered his ideology, his tradition, his culture, his heritage, and in some cases, his lands to become assimilated. 4. Authorized. When it is used governing the actions of the Indian, it is absolute, and any decisions from it are not amendable or can be reviewed by a court of law. 5. Certiorari. A motion by a court to subpoena records from a lower court. When this legal term is used with an Indian, he does not possess the legal right to subpoena records from a lower court, even if it would help him win his case or clarify his position in the matter. In reviewing past cases involving the Indian, a common court decision against the Indian is certiorari denied. 6. Citizen. A member of a state or country, a person, native or naturalized, who owes allegiance to a government and is entitled to protection from it, one enjoying its freedom and privileges as a free man, subject to its laws and statutes, having certain inalienable rights presented by some type of constitution. With the exception of the American Indian, he can enjoy the privilege of voting in another's sovereignty without citizenship being a prerequisite to this right. 7. Judicial process. A system by which, if a crime is committed, a law, by statute, is enforced to either punish or correct the crime. 8. Exterminate. To utterly destroy. 9. Dakota. The true name of the nation and language of the tribe of Indians named by the white culture, the Sioux. Historically, an Indian emperor that once ruled this part of the hemisphere. 10. Fee. In reference to the Indian, the land title that his reservation sits on belongs to the United States government and not to the Indian. 11. Genocide. The act of deliberate, systematic measures toward the extermination of racial, political, or cultural groups. 12. Great White Father. The man who promised to protect and watch over the Indian as long as the grass grows green and the waters ran to the sea. 13. Guardianship. Indian tribes are dependents of the government and their members, wards of the nation, exclusively owing no allegiance to any state. It is Congress alone to say when and how such relationship shall terminate, and until Congress does terminate or abandon it, the government's guardianship continues. The relationship and consequent rights and duties are not affected by the allotment of the lands to Indians, nor by the fact that they have been allowed to take lands in severally, nor that their lands have been freed from restriction against alienation, nor does the relationship cease merely because the Indians have surrendered their tribal lands or have become subject to state laws, nor because they have become citizens of the United States. 14. Impaired. In reference to the Indians, it means to make worse. 15. Indian. Name given by the Europeans, always spelled with a capital I, identifying it as a race and as a political identity, with a complete culture, who are the original landlords and inhabitants of the Western Hemisphere. Statutes enacted to more precisely identify this individual are, for example, 1/4 or more degree of Indian blood, who must be enrolled with an Indian tribe or nation who has a treaty with the U.S. government. A. Urban Indian. He has left the reservation and in doing so has surrendered the protection of a treaty, is subject to state and other local laws. He can be a citizen of a particular state, but not a legal citizen of the United States. B. Reservation Indian. Lives on a recognized reservation, subject to laws and customs of that particular Indian nation. He is not subject to state and other local laws, even though certain states have passed laws with permission of the United States government to force the Indian to abolish his customs and laws. This is illegally done. He is not a citizen of the United States, but a citizen of his particular Indian nation. 16. Insular Committee. 7 U.S. senators whose absolute jurisdiction is over public lands, mineral resources, forfeiture of land grants and alien ownership, Indian relations, tribal care, education, allotment of lands, claims paid out of Indian funds, water rights, mineral, land laws, geology surveys, forest and national parks, and petroleum and uranium conservation. These men construct and present all bills on the Indian to the U.S. Senate. It also has a counterpart in the House of Representatives. It is the most powerful governmental committee in the world. 17. Invalidate. To weaken or destroy. In reference to the Indian, his recognition and lands are to be invalidated. 18. Legal identity. A person that can prove that he is a true citizen of a country which has either a constitution or bill of rights can go any place in the world, and he can find records or laws in any country stating he has citizenship somewhere and it is recognized by that country. When this legal term is in reference to the Indian, his citizenship cannot be legally defined nor his sovereignty established. 19. Mandamus. A suit or writ brought against a government official for actions. In the Indian's case, no court will honor it. 20. Occupancy. The Indian having at most the right to live upon temporarily, with no land ownership. He has no right to timber, grass, hay, minerals, or all oil that may be on the land he occupies. Should these resources be developed and removed from the land he occupies, he is paid only a small royalty for the disturbing of occupancy. 21. Pogrom. An organized massacre of helpless people in an isolated or restricted area. 22. Proprietary capacity. When it deals with the Indian, with those having authority over him, their decisions are as unlimited as if they possessed ownership. 23. Reservation. An isolated and restricted area designated by a treaty between the United States and the Indian for the occupancy of the members of a particular tribe. 24. Property. Means and includes property of every kind and description, real, personal, mixed, and interests therein. 25. Restricted property. Allotted land to an Indian or his family, the title of which is held by the United States government. 26. Severalty. When the Indian with his own finances purchases property outside a reservation, which could include a home purchased in a major city, guardianship and alienation are still imposed by the United States. 27. Sovereignty. The power of government, either as a state or territory, supreme in power, superior in position to all other, as may be discussed by Penpire versus Neff and International Shoe, having the power to sign treaties with other sovereignties, countries in power and control over its subjects, capable of negotiating trade and intercourse acts with other nations, having the statutes, tax, educate, develop, research, census, and censor the activities of its subjects. 28. Termination. No precise or clear definitions laid down by the courts or the Department of the Interior, but it is the only legal act that can remove the Indian from his lands, which states his right to occupancy cannot be extinguished without his permission. This act can only terminate occupancy. It cannot grant citizenship, nor can it grant the ownership of lands. 29. Trust funds. Money belonging to Indians or tribes of Indians because of guardianship, having the absolute power as to how it is managed without giving Indians redress, recourse to constitution rights, or contest in a court of law the management of his trust fund. 30. Trust property. Land that is in the name of all the Indians or in community sense, the title of which is held by the United States government.